George R.R. Martin is a very famous writer who is well known for a cult favorite television series that is both grounded in a gritty, realistic world while also incorporating some strong fantasy elements. This series had everything: drama, crime, character death, betrayal, dark secrets, but it also got real weird in its last season and resulted in an ending that many fans found to be unsatisfying. I'm of course talking about Beauty and the Beast. Yes, George R. R. Martin was a writer and producer for the 80s live-action Beauty and the Beast television series. The show ran for 3 seasons from September 1987 to August 1990. The show starred Linda Hamilton as our Beauty, but her character's name is Catherine. She's probably best known as Sarah Connor from the Terminator series. And the show also starred Ron Perlman as Vincent, our Beast. And he looked like this during the show.
Jellicle songs for jellicle cats. Jellicle songs for jellicle cats.
George wrote 14 episodes of the series, but they weren't 14 linear episodes. So if I'm going to talk about the show, I feel like I need to give you a rundown of the first episode, which George didn't write, but this is when they established the premise. Then we'll talk about the second episode of the series, which was written by George, and then we'll talk about how things began to spiral for the last season. So, episode 1. We meet Catherine going to work as a lawyer at her father's firm. She's a busy 80s career woman with busy 80s career woman shoulder pads. After leaving some fancy work dinner, she's grabbed and thrown in a van by some guys that call her Carol. They're very creepy. They threaten her with a knife, and then they throw her out the side of the moving van and leave her for dead. She's carried off by a mysterious figure and wakes up covered by a full-face, gross-ass bandage. That does not look sanitary.
You're safe now.
Yeah, until she gets sepsis.
Why aren't I in a hospital?
There was no time.
Plenty of time right now. The figure whispers to a man that he identifies as his father about watching to see if her fever rises.
Keep a close watch. If her fever rises, let me know at once.
And okay, listen, if you have a wound, if you have an injury that is followed by fever, that is a sign of infection. It could lead to sepsis. Go to the hospital.
My father and I treated your injuries. You have broken ribs. You need to be still.
Take her to a hospital.
Please don't be afraid.
I'm afraid of sepsis. There's a cozy little underground sewer library, and the two mystery men talk, but of course they're only keeping the camera on the father's face, and they're keeping Vincent's face a secret. The father has antibiotics and was like, I was saving these for an emergency.
I was saving them for an emergency, in case anything happened to either of us.
Father, try to understand. This was an emergency. She would have died.
Sir, antibiotics have an expiration date. How long have you been saving them? The camera pans all the stuff in the room while Vincent gives a poetic explanation about how deep underground they are. It takes about 1,000 years, but we finally get an explanation of Vincent's background of being abandoned as a baby and adopted by the father that we saw in the last scene.
He named me Vincent. That's where I was found. Near the hospital, St. Vincent's.
We see and Catherine feels that his hands are super hairy, and she gasps. But for all she knows, he could be wearing a fur coat. While Vincent is sending a random street urchin for some tea, Catherine decides to take off her full face bandages. Her eyes are fine. They were seemingly just bandaged to hide Vincent's secrets, but her face is covered in cuts. She and the audience see Vincent's face for the first time.
Catherine.
She's not really scared of him, though. So I initially actually thought that he was going to have some kind of healing powers, and that's why he didn't take her to a hospital, and he planned to like fully fix her face. But no. And now he's just like, okay, time to go.
It's time for you to go back.
He just dumps her clothes on her. He guides her through this underground tunnel system to the area directly underneath the basement of her apartment.
Where are we?
The basement of your apartment building.
How did he know where she lived? And she's like, your secret is safe with me, and does this weird side hug nuzzle thing. The vibes are all over the place. And now she's at a hospital, clearly going under anesthesia, which means she's getting surgery, which means that she needed to be in a hospital. She has an anesthesia nightmare, and you don't really dream under anesthesia. But the dream reveals that she's afraid that people will look down on her and laugh at her for being kidnapped and assaulted. The scene is a little goofy, but the intention behind it is depressing. But then she sees Vincent in her dream and she smiles. Now she's back in full face bandages again. Why do they keep bandaging her entire face, including her eyes, for a couple of cuts? At least these bandages look clean. 8 months later, Catherine's face is now fully healed, no scars, and she's decided to get a job at the district attorney's office because she wants to do some good in the world. At this point, I feel like her transition from fancy socialite to gritty investigator really would have been more impactful if we had seen more of her previous life. Like if she'd been really flighty and shallow, and the experience of having her face mutilated and being nursed back to health by a beast would have taught her something. Catherine signs up for self-defense classes with Isaac Stubbs.
I'm Isaac. Isaac Stubbs. This is New York City, so what I do teach is New York City street fighting. Mean and dirty.
I like Isaac Stubbs.
You can kill a man with a shoe.
So now, 8 months later, Vincent is like, Dad, I miss my girlfriend.
But I can't forget her.
We're still connected.
What?
I can feel what she's feeling. I know what she's thinking.
He does have powers, but just not healing powers.
Vincent, your senses, your empathic powers are quite extraordinary.
Catherine tracks down the Carol that those guys were originally trying to kidnap, and she does not want to talk to her.
You've caused me enough trouble.
Carol, you're not the only one they hurt.
We discover Catherine does still have one scar, but it's on like the very side of her face and barely visible. Later in her apartment, she hears a noise out on the balcony. What could it be? Could it be an intruder on her, 10th floor balcony? It's Vincent!
Vincent?
She's a gun, and it kind of looks like she has her finger still on the trigger as she's hugging him. They have these really romantic yet kind of confusing conversations.
I feel the things you're feeling when you do.
How do you mean?
Just know that it's true, and that your pain is my pain. Sometimes, almost as if we're one.
Catherine doesn't ask any follow-up questions. And Vincent's like, I wanted to see you one last time. He can't come back because people will fear him. Kind of.
Your world is filled with frightened people, and I remind them of what they're most afraid of.
Their own ignorance.
Their aloneness.
No, it's because you look like a 6-foot-tall lion with pointy teeth.
I'll never forget you. But I must forget the dream of being part of you.
What does that even mean? But the beast doth protest too much because he stays and she reads to him. The next day, Carol comes into Catherine's office. She explains that she used to work for an escort service that was basically blackmailing its clients, and she refused to go along with it, so the boss sent those guys after her. Catherine wants to use Carol's testimony to prosecute the escort guys.
Would you be willing to testify against them with me?
Yeah.
I'll testify.
But they find Carol and they kill her.
Don't bother. She's dead.
And so are you.
Catherine uses some of the New York City street fighting that she learned from Isaac Stubbs to fight back. Although I really thought she was going to use one of her high heels to kill a man, per the instruction of Isaac Stubbs, but she doesn't. Vincent, he knows she's in trouble. Hurry, Vincent! He takes the subway. He arrives just in time, bursts through the door like the Kool-Aid Man to save the day. Vincent defeats the bad guys, but presumably doesn't kill them. And I was reading an interview with George R.R. Martin that this aspect of the show really frustrated him, that Vincent could throw a guy across a room and have him like collide with a wall, and the guy would just get up and run away because he was afraid of the scary monster. George wanted graphic violence and death. CBS said no. Vincent takes Catherine into the underground tunnel, and does no one in New York City, where space is at a premium, notice these Lion Man-sized doorways in their basements that apparently lead to a secret underground kingdom?
Some pretty strange things going on in this city.
The cops do see the tunnel and are like, huh, that's weird. Let's go get lunch. By the way, too many people in this scene are wearing trench coats. Vincent and Catherine have a romantic moment.
I'm part of you, Catherine. Just as you're part of me. Wherever you go, wherever I am, I'm with you.
And they hug. I will say, this show is weird, but the leads do have chemistry, so they're making it work. It's not obvious in the first episode, but the true kind of genre of this show is crime procedural. Like, there's a case of the week, essentially. And I kind of feel like they rushed over some of the character and world-building elements to get to the solving crimes part. Like, they did an 8-month fast-forward at one point. Rather than show us Catherine's recovery and her development as a human being, it feels like they're just telling us. Catherine is a socialite, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and now this is the situation moving forward. It could have been done better. Okay, now that you've seen the first episode and you know the gist, let's talk about the first episode that was written by George R.R. Martin, which is the second episode of the series. The New York subway is looking extra gross. Some hooligans are harassing a woman who only has $19 in her purse.
Got $19. That's bad.
They're really judgmental that she only has $19. But a mysterious figure who we assume to be Vincent appears and saves her. A news report refers to him as the subway slasher.
Subway slasher struck again last night, killing 2 armed men who allegedly assaulted an elderly woman.
And it says that he killed those guys. I also didn't think that woman was elderly. Catherine is put on the case to find the subway slasher. Of course, she also thinks that it could be Vincent. She visits Isaac Stubbs, and I'd kind of wondered if he was going to be just a one-off character from the first episode, even though they gave him a first and last name. I wonder how many episodes he ended up being in. Oh. Isaac Stubbs and his self-defense instructor friend, Jason Walker, think that the subway slasher is a good guy doing a good thing.
We have each other. And now we've got him. Whoever the hell he is.
Like, he's a hero for the people. Jason's whole deal is that he's a martial arts master who teaches these skills to, like, average citizens. And he has a group of them who seemingly work for him called protectors. The logistics of it aren't entirely clear, but they do wear ugly white pageboy caps. Catherine taps out a message to Vincent on a pipe, and I'm kind of guessing it's Morse code, but I don't know Morse code. She has a nightmare that Vincent attacks her. So she questions the elderly lady that the subway slasher saved at the beginning. The lady also feels that the subway slasher is a hero, and she keeps insisting that she didn't see him and she doesn't know what he looks like.
I didn't see him. I told you people that. I told you and I told you. I didn't see no part of that man.
Until Catherine vaguely pleads once.
I'm not even supposed to be here. This is personal for me. If you could tell me what you saw, anything. His face, his hands.
And the lady cracks like an egg.
He didn't have hands, just claws. He wasn't a human man at all. He was like...
Lion?
An angel.
Oh. Since she didn't say lion, and since I read those interviews with George R.R. Martin where he complained that Vincent couldn't kill people, I guessed from the beginning of the episode that the subway slasher was not Vincent. So Catherine goes down into the underground to confront Vincent. Vincent has a really weird outfit today, and he says a lot of cryptic things.
What should I tell you? That I am not this shadow, this man monster that you hunt. Must you hear the words before you trust? Hear them then. It is not me.
He does explicitly tell her that it's not him, so I'm glad they didn't do that thing where they play kind of coy and have him answer her questions with statements like, "Do you really think I'd do that? Do you not trust me?" But Catherine still flinches away from him. Girl, you were like snuggling up to him last episode. Did the Stockholm Syndrome wear off? If it were me and I saw one lion man down in the sewer, I would also assume that there could possibly be an alligator man, or like a rat man, or even a buffalo man running around down there. And one of them could be a vigilante. Like, a bird man could fit the description of a terrible angel with claws. Catherine has another nightmare that tells her that it's Isaac Stubbs' friend, Jason Walker, who's the subway slasher, and she has no real cause for this assumption. And also her last dream kind of accused Vincent, so she really shouldn't be going off her hunches. She goes to see Jason the next day, and fully unprompted, he goes into a whole monologue about the city's myths and legends about monsters.
Some terrible, fierce creature who haunts the dark places. Some thing with the face of a demon and the soul of an angel.
Catherine starts asking him about the weapons on the wall.
And what are these?
Those are throwing stars. I can see you don't make it to many ninja movies.
And then she's dramatically silent when she comes across these metal blades that look like claws. Catherine's not subtle. She goes back to the DA's office and is like, "We have to bring this guy in. It's totally him." But like, she still has no evidence. And the cops are like, "Yeah, you mean the guy who's like a ninja who keeps bringing in perps on citizen's arrest and goes on TV to talk about how awesome the subway slasher is? Yeah, we already know it's that guy."
Pops up on TV and says how the subway slasher is a hero and not a nutcase. And isn't it too bad we don't have a dozen guys just like him? We talking about the same Jason Walker here?
But they don't have any evidence either. He's always got an alibi, and they've been tailing him, and it's turned up nothing. Then a woman is getting assaulted on a subway train, and the subway slasher appears, but they show him to us clearly now, so we can see that he's got like furry gloves and a weird mask, and then he fights with a cop, and escapes off into the subway tunnels. Vincent visits Catherine and reveals that the subway slasher's been using the old underground tunnels to get around, but if the cops search the tunnels, they might find the secret underground. Vincent has a really articulate and poetic way of speaking.
They hunt for this man as they might hunt for me if they dreamed of my existence.
Since I'm very cynical and sarcastic, I want to make fun of it, but Ron Perlman's delivery and his cadence and his mannerisms as Vincent just kind of like make it work.
You have enough fear in your world. I could never bring you more.
I'd date him. One of Jason's men is spying on Catherine and he sees Vincent and is like, "What the hell is that? Catherine figures out that there are secret tunnels underneath Jason's building, which I thought was obvious, but she had to do research. But then 2 of Jason's goons bring Catherine in to see him, and it's only the 2nd episode, and she's already been kidnapped multiple times. Jason's really focused on the legend of an angel from below who protects the people.
The story, the demon protector, the angel from below.
You know, New York City and its famous angel vigilante legend.
It's too bad your legend doesn't really exist.
And Jason's like, but this legend does exist.
Oh, but he does. And you're gonna tell me all about him.
And you know him! Please introduce me. I just know we'd get along and be the best of friends.
Whoever he is, he has nothing to fear from me. And we're alike, he and I. We're mirror images. Twins, we're the same.
But Catherine won't give Vincent up. There aren't just secret tunnels, but there is a secret passage to the secret tunnels. Jason puts on his furry outfit and dons his fursona.
Chase, you promised no one would get hurt.
Jace would never have hurt you.
Of course, Vincent heard Catherine's voice and comes running to save her. I unironically love the fight between Vincent and the martial arts guys. Like, Jason does a full flip over Vincent's head and then begins to do like this whole thing, and Vincent just looks at him and then hurls him into a wall. Vincent ends up pursuing Jason through the tunnels. They fight again, and Jason does scratch Vincent, but he's okay. But then Vincent falls through some rotting wood on the bridge. Jason's going to strike and then doesn't. And I thought they were going to do a thing where like Jason extends a hand and he helps Vincent up and then they shake hands in understanding. But no. Jason grabs a vine? A really thick cobweb? I have no idea, but he grabs that and he starts to swing himself away. And Vincent's able to get up by himself just fine. But then the underground vine snaps and Jason plummets to his death. Vincent kind of watches him fall like, ugh, god damn it. Catherine compares Jason to King Arthur?
Just waiting down there until he's needed again. Like King Arthur.
She speaks real highly of Jason now that he's dead.
How can one man have so much courage and empathy and passion?
Catherine and Vincent hug, freeze frame, and the episode is over. So yeah, that's the first episode that George R.R. Martin wrote for the series. There's nothing about it that feels explicitly George R.R. Martin in style. It's just fairly consistent with the tone of the show. This series ran for 3 seasons, and I said that the ending got real weird and people didn't like it. So let's talk about what happened there. When they shot the pilot, the cast and crew all thought, wow, we really made something beautiful here, but it's just so weird that it'll never get picked up. But it did. And after 2 seasons, Linda Hamilton wanted out. And she was pregnant at the time, and George R.R. Martin said in one of the interviews that she wanted to go back to doing movies. So when the opportunity came for her to get out of her contract, she took it. The crux of this show, of Beauty and the Beast, is the romance between Beauty and the Beast. And suddenly they didn't have a Beauty anymore. So after 2 seasons of proclaiming this as the most romantic relationship of all time, they killed off Catherine and brought on a new love interest. The new love interest is Diana Bennett, the woman investigating Catherine's murder. Season 3 would only have 11 episodes instead of the usual 22. And then the show ended. It's interesting to look at George R.R. Martin's pre-Game of Thrones work, and I think it's only natural to look for essentially early prototypes of the characters and plots and themes that he would later become known for. But this was sort of a different beast, no pun intended, with multiple writers and network guidelines to adhere to. However, the experience of working on this show did partially lead George to write Game of Thrones. He had been frustrated by the limitations of television in terms of budget and content. So as a reaction to that, he decided to write a book series that was as grand as he could imagine, with as much sex and violence as he wanted. And he did. By the way, the CW tried to reboot specifically this version of Beauty and the Beast in 2012. But in true CW fashion, they made a very weird show where instead of being a literal animal, the Beast was a guy who was the victim of military experiments that tried to create super soldiers using animal DNA. Sort of like the Hulk. When he gets angry, he transforms into beast mode. And that show lasted for 4 seasons. I tried to watch it when it first came out, but I didn't get very far.
This is where the wealthy and the powerful rule.